Good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning. My name is Kevin Chwill, and I am the pastor here at the local Enderby Seventh-day Adventist Church. I also pastor in Armstrong and the Grandview Flats Church up by Noja, the North Okanagan Junior Academy. So I'm kind of on my feet all the time, on the go all the time. And I did invite one of my local elders because he's someone that's here as every Sabbath. So I'm just going to have Brother Dave Fiedler step up beside me. This is Dave Fiedler again. This is one of my local elders. And before he has the introduction of our guest speaker today, I'm going to invite anyone else who needs to kind of work their way in here, and then we'll offer a word of prayer. Okay. Let's bow our heads. Loving Father in heaven, we just thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Lord, what affects our body affects our minds and vice versa. And so I pray that our presentations would be a great benefit to each and every person that has joined us. We ask for your Spirit to be with us as well. We pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen. Okay, Dave, so do you know this gentleman? And if so, how long have you known him?
I could identify him in a police lineup. Yep.
Okay.
I first met Phil when I was 17, so that's a dozen years or more now. Actually, that was, oddly enough, I was single at the time, and I ended up living in their home for a year when their kids were, actually, his youngest was born when I was there, Phil's been out south end of Maple Lake there, the Silver Hills Guest House and Spa. Is that the formal title? I think I got that right, yeah. For, 34 years, something like that? Next year will be 40. Wow, it must be more than a dozen years then. Anyhow, Phil has a wealth of knowledge on health. He's actually fairly smart in a few other areas too. I value his advice and appreciate him as a friend. I think you'll enjoy his presentations. And so without further ado, we're just going to turn it over to Phil Brewer.
Well, thank you very much. And, as I was coming over here, I was thinking, well, how do you introduce a group of people to a whole day on nutrition? We came to a church, and we're going to talk about food for a whole day. I mean, and we've got we're broken it up into 3 different segments. But I'd like to start off with a story because it kind of sets the scene. So the hot sun was just rising over the prickly pastures outside the tiny village of Costa Rica. 100-year-old Don Faustino was outside waiting for a 7:30 a.m. bus. He'd been up since 4 in the morning. He's off to the farmer's market for his weekly retreat of buying ingredients for his famous Sunday soup he shares with his family. After purchasing vegetables, he makes a special jaunt on his way to a bakery down the road to buy some sweet cornbread for his son. You'd think it was a treat from a father for his little boy. Don Faustino is 100, and his little boy is 75 years of age. So this is a fellow that lives in Costa Rica. He's 100 years old. You see, Don Faustino lives in a place in Costa Rica. There are some people that just came back from Costa Rica. They could tell us more about it. But, he lives in a place in Costa Rica where people live to be centenarians. Now, I always used to say centurions, and somebody corrected me because centurions are the warriors. Centenarians are people that are 100 years of age, right? And so these guys live to be 100 years of age. And so, why would you want to study somebody that was 100 years old? I mean, what does that mean? Well, here's the reason why. They took 50 researchers from the University of Chicago, said this: there's no surgical procedure, vitamin, antioxidant, hormone, or genetic engineering available today that have been able to demonstrate the influence the process of aging. In other words, we have found the accelerator, we just haven't found the brake. So we I know those of us in this room who can attest to the fact, as Dave pointed out, he's known me for at least a dozen years, and those dozen years have caused some aging. When he first met me, my hair wasn't this color. It was a different color. And so as we age, we get older. And what they were trying to say is that really, why is it that some people live to be 100 years of age? Why do groups of people live to be 100? So they found 4 areas in the world where there's people that actually have more centenarians than anywhere else in the world. One of them was Costa Rica. Another one was Okinawa, and another one was Sardinia. And so they went and looked at these people. They went and studied them. And they said, okay, well, what makes them live so long? And well, of course, when they came to Costa Rica, these people were rural. They were off the grid. They didn't have power. They lived a simple lifestyle. They were family oriented, and they ate mostly plants from the garden. That was their own garden. They were gardeners. So they went to Sardinia. They went to Okinawa, south of Japan. And these people are similar. Well, one of the things about the Okinawans is they ate sweet potatoes 3 times a day. Can you imagine eating sweet potatoes for breakfast, dinner, supper? One of the interesting things is when you eat the same thing 3 times a day, you never overeat. So they never overate. What would be the point? Oh boy, this is really good. So they never really overate much. So that was one thing. The other thing that was really interesting, and this is a point that is overlooked, and I want us to just let this, because sometimes we just think it's all food. That's it. But these Okinawans, what happens? In a meeting like today, they would pick the oldest person or one of the oldest people here, and they would be up on the platform, and they would be honored. And so the elderly people were honored. They were looked up to, and they were kind of surrounded, and it was an honor to be old. And so people, rather than putting them off to the side, they encouraged their presence, and so that was really powerful, right? So that was an important part of it. Okay, and then we went to Sardinia. Sardinia is an interesting island because going to visit your neighbor is about like 30 minutes on a Stairmaster. It's like straight up, straight down. It's like so there's a lot of exercise, a very simple diet. It was like a plant-based diet, same thing, and these people lived. Oh man, they lived to be into their hundreds. Well, what does that have to do with us today? Where do we fit? Well, there's one other group, and they lived in Loma Linda, California. Now, you would not expect, like all these other, Sardinia is off the grid, they don't have power, and they're kind of very simple rural people, and Sardinia and Okinawa is similar, very similar, it's a very simple lifestyle. But Loma Linda, California? When you say the word California, you don't think rural, simple, you think, well, here's a group of people in Loma Linda, California, and what they were doing is they were eating a plant-based diet. I think I wrote down what they had here to kind of describe it to you. Oh, they had regular exercise. That was good. They had a plant-based diet. They ate small suppers. They drank lots of water. Why do you think drinking water would be of any value? Do you have any idea? If you have a well-hydrated person, even if they have a heart attack, they have 60 to 70% less fatal heart attacks if they're well-hydrated. Just a simple thing of drinking enough water. Okay, so water. And they ate nuts. Well, there is in nuts, there's an alpha-linoleic acid that protects your heart. It actually protects it against heart disease, so it's a special kind of fat. It's a good fat. So here are these people. These were people that were in Loma Linda, California. They were part of a church, Seventh-day Adventist church, and they studied these people, and they said, look, these people are similar to the people in Sardinia, in Okinawa, in Costa Rica. They all live to be centenarians. Isn't that something? Now, one other thing before we jump into the actual lecture here this morning. One of the things that's interesting is no matter which part of the country they lived in, they had one thing in common. You know what it was? Well, the people, they all had different religious backgrounds. The people in Sardinia, they were Catholic. The people in Okinawa, I think they were Shinto. The Seventh-day Adventists were Christian. So they had different backgrounds, but there was one thing they had in common. You know what it was? All the centenarians had a strong belief in God. Isn't that something? Rather than looking at it as being a weakness, it was a strength to them. It actually was something that carried them through difficulties and problems and things like that. They had a strong belief in God. Beautiful. Okay. Well, let's get into what should we eat. When you, let me just, oh, is it up there? Can you put that one up there for me, please? We're having a little bit of, oh, there we go. Okay, so. Yeah. It was there momentarily. There it is. Okay. So where do you get your food? Where does your food come from? What's that? Is it not working? Oh, I see it back. I see it back there. I mean, you can turn around and look at that. Okay. Definitely on that screen back there. So we'll carry on without the screen, and hopefully it works. There we go. So the question is, where do you get your food? Grocery store. Good. Okay. Anybody? Garden, farm, right? Get places. When you go shopping, and you fill your shopping cart, and you push it to the checkout, what do they have at the checkout? Good. Thank you very much, Tex. Appreciate that. When you go to when you push your shopping cart up to the checkout, what do they have at the checkout? What do you see there? Chocolate bars. Right. Okay. What else? There you got chocolate bars for sure. What else? I see some of you are either buying them or at least observing them. You're looking at them. That's something you can see. What else? What else do you have? Candy. Right. Okay. Magazines. What do the magazines say? Almost invariably, if you look at the magazines, there's always something that they say on there. What is it? How to lose weight. Isn't that something? Always. Okay, you get ready for summer, everybody. Let's go. You know, get on the 2-week program. You can lose so many pounds. I always ask myself, why do they have the magazines on the way out? You should have bought it on the way in, then you don't know what you bought was right. You know, this way you got to flip through it. But anyway, so now if you take that magazine home, you're going to find out that the magazine will basically boil down your diet to 3 things. What are they? Carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Those 3 things. Carbohydrates, why? Why carbohydrates, proteins, and fats? What's such a big deal about that? Let's talk about it. Carbs, protein, and fat. Okay? Now, there's 2 words I want us to think about. One is micro and the other is macro. What does micro mean? Micro means what? Microscope. You look at things that are small. So you have micro is small, and macro is what? Big. So you have 3 macronutrients. What are they? Carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. That's it. And you have all kinds of micronutrients. When you were a kid, some of you in this room can really remember your science classes when you went to school, and they taught you about vitamins and minerals. Oh, that was so exciting. You had vitamins and minerals. And then after you left school, somebody came up with the word antioxidants. And you were like, what's that? Am I eating antioxidants? I don't even know what I'm eating. And then somebody came up with the word phytochemicals, and then end oils and flavones and lectins. And wow, like all this other stuff. But we used to just have vitamins and minerals. Remember, that was it. And then you got antioxidants. And antioxidants included most of your vitamins and minerals. And then there was other ones. But there's only 3 macronutrients. Carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and we are eating those from incorrect sources. I'll show you that. And then we spend expensive dollars trying to correct it by buying expensive micronutrients. Okay, so let's take a look at that. The 3 macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. All right, so what does it take to make food? Now, if you came out to Silver Hills Guest House, we drive out the Maple Lake Road, and we cross what's called the Shuswap Falls Bridge. And then now you're beyond the Shuswap. And I always tell our guests, you were brave, because once you cross that bridge, you know, there is a dam up at Cherryville, and it has shown some cracks and weaknesses, and it's a possibility in a really good runoff year that it could break and wipe out the bridge going, you know, out to Silver Hills, and there you are beyond the Shuswap. You're on the other side of the Shuswap River. You're crammed up against the mountains. And the first question you'd ask me, you'd say, Phil, how many potatoes do you have in the root cellar? Like here we are. Let's see, we got 35 people. We got 1,400 pounds of potatoes. Let's divide them up. You get so many. You know, like food becomes really important when you don't have very much of it, right? So what does it take to make food? What are the ingredients? What do you have to make food? If you wanted to actually produce food, what are the 4 things you have to have? What are they? Help me out. You have to have sunshine. You can't grow it in the Arctic, okay? So you have to have sunshine. What else do you have to have? We have to have water. You can't grow it in the desert because you have to have water. You have to have soil, good, and air, right? If you don't have air, you can't grow it in a vacuum. So you have to have water, soil, air, and sunshine. If you took soil and you put it in a pail and mixed it with water and put it out in the sunshine, what would you have? Food for dolls, right? Mud pies, right? My daughters, my granddaughters, because we live out in the forest, they would make up these mud pies, and they would take the petals off of flowers, and they would decorate them, you see. And they make these beautiful mud pies. They're just, they look just delicious. And then they want me to eat them, see. They would, come on, Grandpa, come on, Dad, eat one of these. Look over there. Wow, that was good. If you ate mud pies, would you get food? No. Can you live on mud? No. You can't, right? You can't. You can't live on mud. Every starving civilization, if they dig up the bodies of the starving people and look at their stomachs, they ate dirt. That's what we do when we get starving. We finally get to the bottom. We've eaten everything else off the planet. Everything's clean. Then we eat dirt and we die. Dirt does not have nutrition. You can't get nutrition out of dirt. What do you have to get nutrition? What's the thing you have to have? Well, let's go. Next slide. If there's any, yeah. Let's see if we got it there. You have to have what? Plants. Why? What do plants do? You were grade 5. You can remember this word. This one word the only word you remember from grade 5. What was it called? Photosynthesis. There you go. And the reason why you remember it is because it had the word photo in it. And that photo, you wouldn't. Photosynthesis, that's where the sunlight hits the green leaf, the chlorophyll in the plant, and the plant produces carbohydrate, proteins, and fats. That's where all carbohydrates, proteins, and fats are produced, is in the green leaf of a plant. Isn't that amazing? That's where it is. If we go to Mars, guess what we're going to do? We're going to take seeds with us, water with us. We're going to figure out how to grow plants on Mars, Moon, wherever we go. Until we figure out something else, we're going to have to take our food processors with us, and that's the plants. That's the only way that's where food comes from. Can a cow do that? Can a chicken do that? Can a fish do that? Can a fish produce food out of dirt? Just eat dirt. It can't do it, can it? I mean, an animal cannot do it. And plants, where food comes is plants. That's where it comes from. I've had people tell me, if you ate just plants, and they get this look on their face like they're worried about you, like if you ate just plants, like you're missing something. Like somehow that bird made something else out of it besides food. I mean, I don't know. Food comes from plants. All right, so the next question is how much of our, let's take the next part of that slide. Click on that thing one more time. One of your, can you click it one more time? It's up. It's up? Oh, man, that's me then. Okay, click it one more time. Okay, so let's look at it. This is what, if we took our diet, this is what it kind of looks like. It's not exactly, everybody in this room is different. We all eat somewhat differently. But if we took the average Canadian, this is what it would look like. 12% of our calories comes from vegetables, legumes, nuts. 19% comes from grain. 70% comes from sugar. 17% comes from free fats and oils. 15% comes from dairy products and eggs. And 20% comes from meat, poultry, and fish. So let's think about it. Now, if you had grain, just grain, what would you buy? If I gave you a budget, I said, go off to town and buy me some grain, what ways could you buy grain? Help me out. Just tell me, what could you buy? What ways could you buy grain? There's all kinds of ways you could buy it. Cereal, good, okay. Bread, good. Pasta, ravioli, macaroni, spaghetti. What's that? Rice, okay. That's just the grain itself. Okay, what else? Beans. Well, beans are not grain, it's a legume, but that's okay. What other ways? How many of you ever heard of Tim Hortons? Have you heard of that? I mean, they have grain there, right? They have donuts and Long Johns and Timbits, and right? You get all kinds of grain. In our country, over 90%, I'm going to say 90 plus, of the grain that we have is refined. What does it mean, refined? What are we talking about? Okay, so we'll take a kernel of wheat. There we go. And the kernel of wheat has in it a thing called here, what's that called there? Wheat what? Wheat germ. Okay? And then it has the husk around the outside. What's that called? That's called the what? The bran, right? Okay. Now, what is the bran's job for the wheat? What's the job that the bran has? It protects it from what? It's a protection, that's right, but what does it protect it from? Okay, now, if you took the wheat germ, what's in the wheat germ? There's another thing that's in the germ. What is it called? Germ oil, wheat germ oil. If the wheat germ oil gets in contact with oxygen, it oxidizes and it turns rancid almost immediately. Those of you who have ground your own grain know for a fact if you don't put it in the fridge or somewhere cool or freezer or something like that, it doesn't take long and it will turn rancid. So you have to protect it. And so that bran, what it does is it protects that wheat germ oil from oxidizing. I've heard that they have taken kernels of wheat from pyramids that have been hunkered down on a pyramid for who knows how long, planted them, and they've grown. So it kept it. I mean, that brand, we had a guy that was one of our health guests that came from Calgary, and he was in charge of the electron microscopy department for the University of Calgary, and he said, if you take a look at that brand, there's actually 7 layers. 7 layers on the outside of that brand. Wow, it's just like really well built to protect, right? Now, when we refine it, we take the bran off. And we take the germ out. Why? Why do we do that? That's crazy. I mean, why would we take it apart? Why do we do that? Okay. Some of us in this room can remember back. It won't go rancid good. 1900. There's maybe not too many here. 40% of Canadians lived on a farm in 1900. 40%. If you had 40% of Canadians that lived on a farm, that meant that another 20% at least had family that lived on a farm, and we used to go visit them. And Mom would be making up sauerkraut and making up different stuff, and you'd be getting it from the farm. You'd be bringing it home, you know. Maybe get the good stuff, go home and get it from Grandma, go home and get it from Mom. And that link between the farm was very strong, and people were going back and forth to the farm all the time. And we had that farm influence in our lives. How many people do you think, how many Canadians are farmers in Canada today? What percentage? Give me a percentage. Give me just shout out, whatever you got. There we go. 3%. 3% of Canadians are farmers. Now, here's the problem. How do you get the wheat from the farm to your table? See, a lot of times we kind of demonize the food guys like they're wicked. You know, they're all bad guys. They're all trying to kill us. So that's their objective. Well, if you're a customer, you don't want to kill customers. Like, believe me, you don't want to kill them. You want to keep them alive because they keep buying. That's what you want to do. So the food industry isn't really trying to kill us all, I don't think purposely. But to get the food from the farm to your table is quite a trick. In fact, if you don't take most of the nutrients out of it, it goes bad. So that what you do is you take most of the nutrients out of it so that you can kind of keep it on the shelf. If the person doesn't buy it this week, next week, or the week after, 2 weeks later, or 6 months later, it's still there, it's still pretty good shape. See what I'm saying? Yeah, you be a little more careful how you demonize your food industry. I mean, we have never had this many people live this far from the farm. Are you with me? Never in Earth's history have you had this many people live this far away from their garden or from the farm where they get their food. And the easiest way to get the food there is to feed it to a cow, right? Chop it up, put it in a freezer, and store it. There you got all those nutrients stored up. Then you sell it. You see what I'm saying? That would be the easiest way to do it. It makes it difficult. Are you with me? So okay. Now here's the problem. Underneath the bran, we'll put the bran here. We'll draw that on there like this. Underneath the bran, there's a chemical. There you go. What do you think that chemical does? What would you give it? If you gave it a name, I mentioned it a little earlier. It's an give it to me. So when we take away the bran, what happens to the antioxidant? It's gone. Have you ever had anybody phone you up and say, you know, I'd like you to come over we're having a party. I love parties. Well, let's go. What is it? You don't even have to have an excuse. Let's just have one. Look, we're having a party. What's the party about? Well, you know, we met this guy, and his friend got involved in this company, and the guy that started the company, he paddled up to the headwaters of the Amazon, crawled into the bush, and he found a leaf. And this leaf has got more antioxidants than any other leaf on the whole planet. And now we made it into a juice. And the guy in the bottle has got a big arm like this a big muscle bulging out there. And you drink this stuff, and you know, like this is going to do it for you. Like this is going to solve every problem. You're going to live forever. You're never going to die. You're never going to age. You're going to, you know, it's $40 a bottle. If you buy 2 bottles, you can get them for $35. If you buy a pickup load, you can become a dealer like your friend, and then you can open your own parties up. Have you ever heard of this stuff? We've all heard of it. Why did our grandma and grandpa not talk about this stuff? They were smart. They lived why? Well, because we systematically remove the nutrients from our food so that we can make it last longer. And so now all of a sudden we have to get nutrients from somewhere else. See what I said? Expensive nutrients. All right? Okay. Well, what's the next one? Let's do the next one. What about the next one? Sugar. Oh, boy. Nobody here eats sugar. We hate it, right? Okay. How many teaspoons per man, woman, and child in Canada do we eat of sugar per day? Teaspoons per day. Anybody? Give me a guess. I said somebody got 30. I got 30 over here. I got 35. Anybody go over 30? 30, 35. Come on, help me out. What do we have? Okay, 42. 42 teaspoons of sugar a day. There we go. That's Canada's average. I had a fellow that came as a health guest. He was drinking 2 big gulps a day. Now, a can of pop, 10-ounce can of pop is about 10 teaspoons. So he was drinking 320. That's about a teaspoon per ounce. So he was drinking 320 teaspoons of sugar a day. Right? Okay, so 42 teaspoons. How many feet of sugar cane do you think that represents? What is that? How many? How many feet? 90 feet of sugar cane. Now, where do we say food comes from? Food comes from where? From plants. We took a plant and we boiled it, and then we put it in a centrifuge and we spun it, and we spun out crystalline carbohydrate. No antioxidants, no phytochemicals, no vitamins, no minerals, no protein, just sugar. And we eat 42 teaspoons of that a day. Well, that's a lot, right? I mean, that's not really a plant anymore. We've systematically took the good stuff out of it. All right? The next one is free fat. What is free fat anyway? How many go to Costco? Do you have anybody been to Costco? Did anybody go down to Costco? Do you have Costco? Do they have samples at Costco? Yeah? I asked my guests, when they come to the guest house, I said, now if you wanted to get another sample, like if you had one, it was good, like it tasted good, right? How do you get the second one? Like the lady's still there, and she'll remember you, like how do you get it? Well, I've had ladies tell me, well, I send my husband. Or I send the kids, or you get another one. Anybody else got a creative way? I'm going to tell you a couple. Anybody? This one lady told me, she says, that's why they have the clothes there, because you can put on different jackets and go and do it. So, get as many samples as you want, just keep on changing your jacket. Right? Is that what we call free fat? No. What is free fat? Dr. Budwig, how many of you, those of you who have been following the health food industry, you would run into a guy called Udo Erasmus who wrote Fats That Heal and Fats That Kill. He wrote a book. But actually he was a German background, and he went to Germany, and the lady who actually gave him the information, her name was Dr. Budwig. And she was a biochemist and a physician, and she was a genius lady. And she talked about free fat, and she said free fat is fat that you take it away from the food that it was in. So you take the corn oil out of the corn, you take the soya oil out of the soybean, you take the peanut oil out of the peanuts, and you take the oil out of it. And that's what you call free fat. It's not free in price, it's just free in the fact that it's not with the food that it came with. So what does that mean? Okay, so how many cobs of corn do you think it takes to make 1 tablespoon of corn oil? 12 to 14 ears of corn to make 1 tablespoon of corn oil, okay? So my wife and I want to watch a DVD or whatever they call them, and we want to have a batch of chocolate chip cookies, and we take a quarter of a cup of corn oil and put it into the flour and get some chocolate chips and make up a batch of cookies, and between the two of us we share the equivalent of half a bushel of corn. Like it's just like, as I'm saying, like all of a sudden, whoa. Tremendous amount of energy, a tremendous amount of fat when you think of it, that it represents. And we don't have the vitamins, we don't have the minerals, we don't have the antioxidants, we don't have the phytochemicals, we don't have the protein, we just have the fat. See? Now I want us to do some addition. Here we got grain is 19% of our calories, right? And we told you that was 90% of that's refined. That's the Long Johns and the Tim Hortons, Timbits, and that's 90%. It's the refined cereals and that kind of stuff. 70% of our calories comes from sugar, and 70% comes from free fats and oils. If we added those up, the ones that we've taken the nutrients out of, what do we get? What's the total? 17 and 17 is 34, and 20 would be 54, minus 1 would be 53. So 53% of the calories that we consume in our Canadian diet come to us from foods that we call refined, where we've taken out the micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, fiber. See what I'm saying? If a person was to change their diet, that would be the place to start. That would be the place where you would start. I have people that come, we got to quit eating this, that. The thing to do would be to change that. And the reason for that is because with the other 47% of your calories, you've got to get all your vitamins and minerals. And we can't do that. And so what we're doing is when we drive, now that they've made it convenient, when you walk into the food store, they have, at the end of the shelf, they have multivitamins. So I know I'm not eating properly, so I backstop what I'm not eating properly with this and this and this and this micronutrient. You see what I'm saying? So in other words, instead of eating a healthy diet, I'm eating a diet that I know is kind of mediocre, and I backstop it with nutrients that are going to try and replace what's missing. Are you with me? Make sense? Okay. So what would we do with the grain part of it? What could we do? Instead of the 90% refined, what would you do? More whole grains. What would you do instead of sugar? What was that? Fruit, thank you. We had a fellow that sat on our board. His son is in this room, by the way. And he told me, he said he had a fruit orchard. I think he had 9,000 fruit trees. I'm pretty sure. I picked an awful lot of them. I didn't pick all 9,000, but I'm telling you, I picked an awful lot of them. And he told me, he said that he used to go to, where they have these rock crushers? You've seen them. You can't help but miss them. They're across the valley, and the whole place is dust. You see dust just flying everywhere. And he'd ask the guy that's running the rock crusher, on the weekend when you're not there, can I go by and sweep it off with a broom, sweep all the rock dust off? And he'd take the rock dust and he'd put it at the bottom of his fruit trees. He said fruit trees need minerals. My daughter went to massage school. You can't hear me?
Lift your hand on the mic more.
Lift it up?
Yeah,
is that better? Okay, thank you. It feels uncomfortable. Okay. My daughter took massage class, and one of the things they wanted to do with her massage training was to give her nutrition training so that when she was massaging people, that she would be able to speak intelligently, at least about what she was, about eating. So she brought a nutrition textbook, boom, grabbed it as soon as I walked in the house. What are they teaching my daughter, right? What's first chapter? 45% of Americans eat no fruit. How much fruit? 0 fruit. And only 2 vegetables a day, and those are largely fried potatoes. See, if we wanted to get our diet together, that fruit is full of minerals. People are taking multi-minerals and mineral supplements and all kinds of. Do you eat any fruit? No, I don't eat fruit. Fruit is full of minerals. Actually, excellent way to get it. Okay, and plus it's got sugar, natural sugar. What would you do instead of eating free fats? More what? What could you do instead of eating free fats? More nuts and seeds. You can get your fats from nuts and seeds. In fact, is the study they did in California on doctors, guess what they found out? They found out that the doctors who ate more nuts had less heart disease. because there's alpha-linoleic acid in the nuts, and it protects the heart against heart disease. The fat in nuts protects your heart. And so we think, well, it's, nuts are high in fat, but that's the kind of fat that's healthy. It's good for you. Okay, now what about the dairy products, eggs, meat, poultry, and fish? What do you think about that? Wow, here I am I have a classroom. This is a little larger classroom than we have at the guest house, but similar. And you ask that, and, here we are. They've come to the guest house. We've had them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We've had them 3 days. We gave them a lecture on exercise. We gave them a lecture on water, the importance of water. We gave them a lecture on the importance of deep breathing. And the reason why we specifically don't talk about nutrition for the first 3 days, you know why? Because I already talked to the kitchen. I told them, you either kill them with the food, or I'm not going to get them to listen to me on nutrition. So it's got to be good. You make it taste good. Make it love it. They got to love the food. Because if I come along and tell you can't eat this and can't eat that, well, they say, well, I can't eat this either. It's got to be something. It's got to be good. You got what I mean? Say? It's got to be able to eat it, right? Okay, so now we get there. Now they've been there 3 days, and they know for sure that we haven't been putting any chicken or fish or anything like that in there. So when I come along and I ask them, what do you think about dairy products, eggs, milk, meat, poultry, and fish? It's dead silent. They don't want to say a word. I don't know what to say. If I say anything, they'll throw me out. Well, let's think about it. I mean, this is quite a bit. There's 35% of our calories in Canada come from those three sources. So okay. So I asked the people questions. So I'm driving over to a lecture in West Bank. A cooking school asked me to come over and do a little something to do with their cooking school, right? 30, 40, 50 ladies there. And on the way over, this is a few years back, I'm listening to the radio. And they were talking about bird flu. Have you ever heard of bird flu? Yeah, bird flu. And what had happened was apparently in Germany there was a cat that caught a bird that had bird flu. It ate it and it died. The cat died. And you see, a cat is a mammal, same as you and I. That's a warm-blooded creature, right? And so it caught a bird and it died. And they went like, wow. That means if me, a mammal, was to eat a chicken, which is a bird, and the chicken had bird flu, I could die. So the Germans quit eating chicken, just like that. Boom. Well, it was quite a surprise to the suppliers, the producers, because if you're growing chickens, if you have a chicken barn full of chickens and people stop eating them, what do you do with them? I mean, they get old in a hurry. Like you can't stop them growing. They keep growing. They get tough, and so they got to start dumping them in the landfill. They had pictures of tandem dump trucks dumping chickens in the landfill. Wow. Well, it didn't last forever. Like one German was looking out the window and he saw his friend come out of Kentucky Fried Chicken, and he was still living, and so they gingerly went back to eating chicken, and they're with their ear always, if that bird flu comes back, there goes the chicken again, like they were watching it carefully. Canada, we had a similar situation where, and you can remember this wasn't that long ago, where they had farmers some farmers were taking fish guts and feeding it to cows. Do you hear about that? And it wasn't like a bad thing. It was like to up their protein content. Well, why wouldn't you feed fish to cows? I mean, have you ever seen, we have a stream that goes through our property, and they spawn, like salmon spawn on that stream, and the neighbor has cows there. And you never hear a cow say, hey, Betsy, they're over here, They don't dive into the stream and start trying to catch salmon. They just don't eat salmon. Why don't fish eat salmon? What's that? They're cows. Well, I mean, that's a good source of food. Why don't they eat it? What do cows do when they chew their food? They swallow it, and then what do? They burp it up, and they chew it again. I mean, can you imagine the third time that salmon came up? I tell people, no wonder they got mad. We had a couple of farmers that came over from Alberta, and they told me that they had a sign on the highway, on number 2 highway, and they had a chicken. He had his hand, he was standing like this, And it said under the sign, if the mad cow doesn't get you, I will. You know, it's like, it was the farmers that put it up as a joke, you know, like, I mean, just. But Canadians, we said, no, don't feed, it's actually against the law now to feed cows roadkill and fish and all that kind of stuff. You feed them grain and things like that, right? So, well, I mean, there's somebody in this room, I'm thinking, I mean, we've always run across somebody who's got an Aunt Minnie. And Aunt Minnie has been eating 3 strips of bacon and 2 eggs every morning she's 90-something, right? And seems as fit as a fiddle. Well, she's got some aches and pains, so she's, you know, maybe a tumbler of rum, you know, once a day or maybe even twice a day towards bedtime. It helps her sleep, you know. And they'll bring that up. I've been in a health class in large groups like this where somebody puts up their hand and say, I got an Aunt Minnie. You know, and Aunt Minnie is eating 3 strips of bacon and 2 eggs, and she's drinking half a tumbler of rum a day, and she's 90. You know, what do you say to that? Well, I went and saw Aunt Minnie when she was sober, you know, before she went to bed. And I talked to her, and she told me what she told you. And what did she tell you? I want you to think about this, because we sometimes generalize to our own hurt. You see what I'm saying? We generalize to our own hurt. It's destructive to us. What did Aunt Minnie tell you and tell me and told all of us? The food today is what? Nothing like when I was a kid. Isn't that what she told you? She said, chicken today is not like, it just falls apart. You put it on the head. It's just like, it doesn't have any, you know, it's like the chickens aren't. And she says, the eggs, you know, when I was a kid, we used to get an egg. We take it over to the casserole dish, and we whack it 3 times on the side of the dish before we could crack it. You know, have to really whack it. Now we have to make sure it doesn't separate. We call it separating. It doesn't fall apart on the way from the fridge to the casserole. Like, it's not the same product, right? It's a different product. Aunt Minnie, if she's 90, guaranteed she was raised on a family garden. Guaranteed. They didn't have Safeway, Super Value. They had a garden. That's what they had. Even if it was in the city, they had a garden. That's what they had to live on a garden. She had to walk to school 5 miles uphill both ways barefoot. She told you, right? I mean, she had to walk to school. I'm guaranteed. She didn't have a school bus if she's 90 years of age. She lived through the dirty 30s when she had a pound of butter a month and 2 eggs a week. See, we're living in a different era, and we can't generalize. You know, she is alive today because of where she came from, that substance that built her muscles and bones as she was growing up. That's where she is. Do you think the big gulp generation, our generation, will live to be their 90s? You think so? Do you think we'll live into be our 90s? They figure if you were born in the year 2003, over 45% of those kids born in 33% of those kids born in 2003 will be diabetic in their lifetime. With me? Like, I mean, that's not Aunt Minnie, see? All right, so I got somebody comes, okay, Phil, look. They see that we have worships in the morning, you know, prayer. So we must believe in the Bible. So they scrounge up a Bible from somewhere, and they bring it over to me, and they show me this story of Jesus multiplying fish. Say, look, I mean, this is the gold standard. Fish is okay, right? Well, it is. But I was in New York City giving a lecture, and it said, the New York Times weekend edition said on the front page, if you are pregnant, do not eat fish caught on the eastern seaboard. It may harm your pregnancy. Wow. Can you imagine? Just having fish caught on the eastern seaboard may harm your pregnancy. Why? What did we do? How did Jesus multiplied fish and gave it to everybody, and now all of a sudden we can't eat? Why? What happened? What took place between then and then? We got so busy polluting our planet that in one generation we were able to pollute our entire planet. Now, I got to give you this statistic because it makes everybody, like, you don't, when you say pollute, you think, well, that's something they do in Vancouver. You know, that's it. Out here, we're in these pristine valleys. Everything's beautiful. If you were to go to the Arctic Circle, take an Inuit mother's breast milk, put it in a cardboard container, you would not be allowed to ship it across the Alaska border because the PCB content is too high. It's illegal to ship it across the border because the PCB content in her breast milk is too high to be allowed to ship it across the border. That's how good a job we did. It's not the animals are bad. Animals are not bad. It's just they're concentrators. It takes 12 pounds of vegetation to make 1 pound of flesh. So if we're doing something wrong with our gardening, if we're using all kinds of chemicals and chemical agriculture, the animals are just concentrating. That's the problem. That's all it is. They're not bad. I mean, they're actually fabulous creatures. And if you had to ship food from the farm to the table, that's one of the most convenient ways to do it, literally. Because you can concentrate a lot of calories in a piece of flesh, and you can freeze it, and it'll last for a long time. Take it out and cook it. Makes a lot of sense, right? It's not a stupid idea. But you have to deal with the problems it's created. Okay, next slide, please. Click it again, please. Click it twice. There you go. Today's meats, dairy products, and eggs are vastly different commodities of those even 30 years ago. Factory farmed animals have as much as 30 times more saturated fat than yesterday's pasture-raised creatures. We're dealing with a different product. Next slide, please. The products from factory farms contained residues from pesticides, hormones, growth stimulants, insecticides, tranquilizers, radioactive isotopes, herbicides, antibiotics, appetite stimulants, and larvicides. Those things were not available to your grandparents on their farm. They didn't have them. They weren't there, okay? And so now we have a different product, and we have to consider it from that viewpoint. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide, the next two slides you won't remember a thing, but I'm going to pass you a shopping list, and you'll remember that. First of all, you can take it home. Even if you don't remember it, you can refer to it. This is just a concept. If you take a look at this slide, in 1860, if you went to the Harvard School of Medicine, I love schools of medicine where where the doctors, when they perform a surgery, they have somebody that keeps records. How many sutures, who sutured it, how many milligrams of whatever it was to put the person to sleep, how long were they asleep, how extensive was the surgery done, how much did they take out, how much did they put in, the whole thing, it's all written down. So you can go back to 1860, and you can look at, in the Harvard School of Medicine, what were people dying of? What were they doing surgery on? 2 cardiovascular patients a year, 2 people with plugged arteries a year in 1860. It was almost unheard of. You would have, if you had a person that had plugged up arteries, you'd bring in the doctors on grand rounds and say, look at this person, they're plugged up. 50% of Canadians will die of cardiovascular disease or one of its effects, 50%. People say to me, well, you got to die of something, Phil. You got to die. It's true, you do. You have to die of something. So I had a fellow that came to our place. He was a neighbor. Oh, man. I wish you could meet Jim. He'd make everybody in this room happy. You'd love the guy. He was a lovable guy. He was like a big teddy bear. This guy was a kid magnet. And he walked in the room. Every kid in the room wanted to come and talk to him. And his eyes sparkled. They just loved him right now. It's Jim. His family was the family that started the local Christian church in Lumbee. Fabulous family. Beautiful. I could tell you stories, funny stories, all kinds of them. I heard that Jim was not doing well. So I phoned him up. I said, Jim, how's it going? Oh, he's upbeat. He's always upbeat. How's it going? Upbeat. I said, Jim, how's the depression? And all of a sudden I heard a man crying on the other end of the line. I said, hey, bud, you got to come on up to Silver Hills. Come on, come be a guest. Jim had a stroke, 42 years of age. He had a massive stroke on one side of his body. And so he came to the guest house. And we got him walking. Hey, it's hard. We got him to swing his leg and swing his arm. And he was a success, as far as Silver Hills goes, it took us 6 weeks, but we got a success story out of it. I mean, he's really going. And he said, I don't know what to do with my time. He says, he had to sell his business. He couldn't run his business anymore. He had to sell his farm. He couldn't run his farm anymore. And so he says, I don't know what to do. I said, you're a kid magnet. Why don't you go to the elementary school and offer, the hardest thing that an elementary school teacher has to do is to teach reading. You can only do it one other person at a time. I said, so if you go and offer your service, and he did. He went to the elementary school, and he would help the teachers and teach the kids to read. The only thing is that Jim lost his family. See, when you have a stroke, you're not the same person anymore. And his wife and him just couldn't make it anymore. It was finished. It was like, he lost his family, he lost his job, he lost his business, he lost everything. He moved to the island. He moved out of Lumbee. He was so well known in Lumbee. He said everywhere he went, like he just couldn't face his friends even, right? People tell me you got to die of something. Jim would have told you if he was here this morning, it would have been merciful if I would have died. Not just had a stroke. If I would have died dead that day, that would have been much more merciful. See, 50% of Canadians don't die of old age. They die of some form of cardiovascular disease. Some form of plugging up of their arteries. That's what they die of. Many Canadians spend the last 20, 30 years of their life taking medications, not able to travel out of the country, constant doctor visits, never really assured that they're going to make it to the next day. I mean, it's not a pretty sight, okay? Okay, so if we took 1860, you'll see here's what that's 1980. So that started in 1980. It's continuing right now, 50% of Canadians. If you look at the numbers up here, you'll see that 10% of our calories came from protein, 20% came from fat. Then you'll see that 50 to 55% came from complex carbohydrate and 10% came from sugar. If you go to 1980, it's carried through to even today, 15% came from protein, 40 to 45% came from fat, and then 20% came from complex carbohydrate and 20% came from sugar. How did we change that much? And you can tell me now because I already told you. What did we do different in our lifestyle from 1900 to today? What happened? What did we do? We moved off the farm and we moved into the city. We had to get the calories from the farm to the city. And remember what I told you, the easiest way to do it is what? Feed the calories to animals and freeze them. And then you can sell them to people, and that's the easiest way to do it. I mean, it's the fastest way to get the nutrients from the farm to your table. There's only one thing. The animal does not store carbohydrate. What do they store? Fat. So when you are eating the grain from the farm, you're not getting the fat. But when you're eating the grain from the farm through the cow, you're getting the fat. You see what's happening? And that's the stuff that's plugging up your arteries right there. That's the thing that's causing the disease right there. And that's the problem that's creating it. Next slide, please. So, what's the next slide? What's the ideal diet? Here's the Western diet I just told you about. Then we have the Prudent diet. Then we have the Pritikin diet. Then we have the ideal diet. Nathan Pritikin, how many of you have heard of him? Anybody heard of him? Some of you in this room are old enough or young enough to remember him. So Nathan Pritikin, he was an electrical engineer, and there was people that were having all kinds of heart disease. Hand up higher. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I knew there was a reason. Okay. So Nathan Pritikin, what he did is he started the longevity centers in Santa Barbara, California. And he came up with a diet that was like this, 80% carbohydrate, 10% protein, 10% fat. And 60 Minutes did a special on it. They have this fellow, he's at a 2-story house. He's got heart disease, he's got angina. So 60 Minutes pulls up to the house. And on the front yard is a for sale sign. He can't climb upstairs. He's got angina. As soon as he starts walking upstairs, he gets crippling chest pain. He's having shortness of breath. And so the house is for sale. They meet his wife. They talk to his wife. His wife is wringing her hands. She's got the life insurance policy on the table. It's paid right up to date, right? No, this guy's like a fragile. It could break down any time. You got to make sure he's well cared for. And so they take him off to the longevity center. He can't even put his own suitcases in the car. His wife has to carry him and put him in the car. A month later, the 60 Minutes pans, the car drives up. He gets out of the car. They pop up the suitcase. He grabs the 2 suitcases. He runs up the stairs 2 at a time, grabs his honey in his arms, spins her around in the middle of the floor. They take him off to the doctor. They put him on the treadmill, and the doctor turns to him and are you so and so? Like, doesn't make sense. This guy's changed. He's altered, right? What he had done is he'd gone to Nathan Pritikin Center for a month. So he had a fellow that came from Alberta. John was his name. John was a mechanic. You know what kind of mechanic he was? How many have heard of John Deere tractors? Anybody heard of John Deere tractors? Anybody like John Deere? John Deere, yeah. Wow, everybody, I see the heads. John Deere. Yeah. If you have to have a Z-Tour, that's one thing. But if you own a John Deere, like that. Well, he was a John Deere mechanic, and he had all these old John Deeres in his shed, big, loaded. I went over and looked at it. I was drooling, wow. John had been to the cardiologist in Edmonton, in the hospital, in that one they have all the flowers in. The University Hospital in Edmonton. You go inside, it looks like a park. They got flowers, plants all growing through the center of the hospital. Leading cardiologist in the hospital said, "John, you have to have a bypass operation." And so I said to John, I said, "Why don't you come to Silver Hills?" Well, he said, "I'll go and talk to my doctor." He went and saw his doctor, and the doctor said, "It's not going to, I don't think it'll help." And I said to him, "Well, come anyway. I mean, it's not going to hurt. Maybe it won't help, but, if you had to go 60, if you had to do anything, why not just try it? It's not going to hurt." So he came in January, of all things. It was freezing cold outside, and the only thing we could do is walk between the guest house and on the flat ground. We couldn't even get in the bush. It was snow everywhere and everything. And so we walked 40 minutes twice a day right in front of the house. 3 days after he got there, you know what he told me? "Every muscle in my body aches." Oh, I was so happy. Oh, I was thrilled. Well, I thought, can you imagine if a guy was in really good shape? What's exercise going to do for him? It's not going to help, right? But he was mechanicking, and he was doing a lot of physical work, but he wasn't doing walking, regular exercise. He was with us for 3 weeks. He went home, and it was so cold in February in Alberta that he couldn't go out of his house and walk because he got angina right away. You say, well, that's part of the problem when you have heart disease is that you get cold air, it takes blood to warm up the air, and that blood is what robs your heart, and you get angina, you can't walk. So he did it in his house, and his wife told me she went nuts. She went downstairs and ran the sewing machine, put earplugs in. Here's this guy going living room, kitchen, bedroom, living room, kitchen, bedroom, just 40 minutes twice a day, wore a hole in the linoleum, and it just kept on going. March, he went outside. April the 15th, he went to his doctor. You know what his doctor put him on a treadmill and turned to John. This is the guy that said it wouldn't do him any good. He said, "Do you want to cancel your bypass operation?" Isn't that amazing? See, he changed his lifestyle. And it's absolutely phenomenal what could happen. A person changes his lifestyle. Okay, so that's the Nathan Pritikin. Well, the problem with the Nathan Pritikin, I want to pass out. Who's got the sheets? Somebody back there. I gave some sheets. Clarice, can you pass out those sheets, please? I want us to go shopping. I gave you a shopping list. Try to give one per family, if you can. I don't think we got enough to give everyone. How many people's in this room? 25, 30, 40? I don't know. There should be 50 here anyway, so if you run out, you'll have to peek over somebody else's shoulder. When you look at this, I want you to this is a nutrition sheet, nutrient sheet, but it's really not that. Really what this is an eye test. See, so there's so much information on here and so small, test your eyes, okay? So I've always had people tell me, I can't see it, I can't read it. So, okay, so the ideal diet, it's at the bottom of your list. It's on the list right here. I want you to just take a look at here. The ideal diet is what? 70% carbohydrate, 10% protein, 20% fat. And somebody would say to me, well, why 20% fat if Nathan Pritikin was getting such results with 10% fat? The reason why I say that is because if you ate lettuce, that's 7% fat. 7% of the calories in a head of lettuce is fat. And knowing that, if you want only 10%, you're going to have a very, very strict, stringent diet. And we've found out working with people that if you put them on a strict, stringent diet, they will do it for a period of time until they achieve a certain goal, and then they go get something good to eat. And when they say something good, what do they mean? Well, I had two guys that went to get something good to eat. They went downtown, they came back, and they had 2 big tubs of Kentucky Fried Chicken. That was something good to eat. So if you want to make sure that people get a diet that has enough in it that they will stay with it. And we've had numerous people come to us, and on a 20% fat diet, their heart disease went away. So it's fine. Okay, let's take a look. Second one on the list. What is the hamburger? What's the percentage of protein in hamburger? Second one on your list. Anybody read it? It's pretty small. What does it say? 50% protein. How much fat? 50% fat. How much carbohydrate? How much carbohydrate are we shooting? Well, you got it on the bottom here. What are you shooting for as the ideal diet? What percentage of carbohydrate? 70%. How much carbohydrate is there in a hamburger? Let's look at sirloin steak, choice broiled. How much protein? Anybody got it? 25. How much fat? 75. How much carbohydrate? 0. Now see, my wife and I have to say she's not here today. My wife and I have done cooking schools all the way from Port Hardy to Winnipeg, and lots of them, okay? Cooking schools all over the country. And we would put on a fabulous feast for people, and we'd have somebody who come quietly to us, and they would say, where's the protein dish? Now, if we had sirloin steak, what would they say? We got the protein dish, right? How much protein is there? How much protein is there in sirloin steak? 25%. Well, how much fat? Okay, take a look at broccoli just for a minute. Grab over to broccoli. How much protein is there in broccoli? 28%. How much is there in sirloin steak? 25%. How much fat is there in broccoli? How much fat is there in broccoli? 8%. Now you see what's going on? You see what I'm trying to tell you? What we did is we stopped eating the plants when we left the farm, and we started shipping the plants via animals. You see what we're doing? And we took the animals, took the fat with them. That's where the problem is, right there. You see what it is? See it as clear as a bell. Okay, let's go down to fish. Somewhere here we got salmon. We're BC, right? 51% protein. How much fat? 49%. How much carbohydrate? 0. Let's go down to let's do eggs. Oh, there's a good one. How much protein in egg? No, that's the white. Let's go down one. The poached egg. How much is there? 34% protein. How much fat? 64%. Did you know an egg was that fat? You didn't know that, did you? When my wife and I got married, I made breakfast Sunday mornings. Let her sleep in. I made an omelet. That's easy, right? I could whip up an omelet. But I never thought it was fat enough. I used to put in cheddar cheese. Let's put in some, let's make it, I want to make it special, right? Like it needed help? That's 64%. Well, look at cheddar cheese. Let's go down there. What has it got? Cheddar cheese is 20%, 27% protein and 71% fat. You see where we're getting our fat? Every time you touch an animal product, you're getting fat. That's the problem. There's your problem right there, okay? All right, let's go down to grain. Far right-hand column. All the way down, 69, 62, 83, 72, all high in complex carbohydrate. If you go to your fruits, look at all your fruits except for avocado. Everything else is in the 90s, 80s. If you look at your vegetables, the same thing, all high in complex carbohydrate. See that? If I wanted to eat this diet, this ideal diet, 70% carbohydrate, I would eat largely fruits, grains, and vegetables. Is that right? That would be where I would zero in on, largely fruits, grains, and vegetables. Not exclusively, but largely. That's where we go, right? All right, well, so let's summarize it. You guys have been sitting a long time. Somebody told me sometimes you can only remember as much as your backside will let you. If it gets tired, you just can't remember anything anyway. So, okay, so here we go. So here we are. We're sitting here and we're thinking, next slide. Let's do it that way. I think I got 2 more slides you can show you, yeah. Keep going. Keep going. One more. There you go. Okay. This was the 4 food groups. Dairy, meat, grains, and fruits and vegetables, right? This was 1972. And I'll be telling you in the next lecture how we got that, okay? Next slide, please. This is 1995. You see that they're advocating that we eat largely grain, fruits and vegetables, small amount of dairy, and a small amount of meat, 3 ounces of meat, right, a day. Now, if you're making a meal and you're inviting over friends, what do you make as the center of your meal? The entree, right? The entree. I mean, you know what you can build the meal around when you know what you're going to have for an entree. The first place you have to do is you have to start with your entree. So if you have turkey, you got cranberries. If you got steak, you got mushrooms. You got fish, you got coleslaw. I mean, you know what you go. But if you follow what the Canadian government is saying here, this is their recommendation: eat largely grains, and you invite some people over. Well, come on over. We're having oatmeal. Come on over. We're having 3 ounces of meat. You can come and you go like, I see you guys have been running into hard times. We'll bring the entree next time. We know you're running a little short here. See, the problem is that when you get into a certain character, and I have to be, honest with you. When you make a change, when you look at your diet and you start questioning it, it's not that easy to change because we're creatures of habit. And we get used to certain things, and making changes is not, you just don't snap and do it. We have people who come to the guest house, and that takes time. Sometimes people go like, they say, well, okay, I heard them. We're gonna start making some changes. So we're gonna eat the low-fat version of cheese. We're gonna eat the low-fat version of dairy, and we're gonna get the low-fat chicken, skin the chicken. Is that what we're really saying? It's really exchanging one animal product for one plant product. That's really the direction you're going in. I'll tell you one more reason, then we'll quit. So you're sitting in your car, and the car in front of you is belching out benzene or diesel or whatever it is. You're sitting in here and you're breathing it, and you're going like, whew, what a stink. And your body has to get rid of that chemical, and there's all kinds of chemicals in our environment. And the beautiful thing is that plants have in them biochemical pathways that actually help your body get rid of those poisons. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, that plants actually have in them antioxidants and different things that help your body get rid of those poisons. And the cow that's grazing along the side of the freeway, it helps him get rid of those poisons. But the properties that are helping his body get rid of the poisons, you don't get by eating him. You have to eat the plants yourself. As one person said, if you looked at your plate, ask yourself, working where I work or driving where I drive, how many plants every day should I be eating? Doesn't that make more sense? Like, ask yourself the question, living where I live and the amount of pollution around me, how many plants should I be eating every day? Michael Pollan, who made his life work in studying nutrition, summarized it this way, and I could have started with that. He said, eat plants, not too much. No, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. So eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Have a good break. We're going to take a few minutes off.
Thank you, Phil. That was good information. And we're going to take about a 5-minute break. And during that time, if any of the kids in the audience want to come to the front here, we're going to have a children's story for them. So for now, stretch your legs, use the bathroom, which are through these back doors, and basically head straight that way through. You'll see a little hallway, and there's men's and women's bathrooms on either side. So about 5 minutes, and we'll reconvene. Thank you.